Hi, good evening, and you're watching the Daily News Simplified of 10th of January. And I'm Ankit Singh. Today, we are going to discuss six important articles. The first of which is on the issue of International Court of Justice. Because South Africa, it has urged the ICJ to order Israel for suspending its military operation, which is ongoing in the Gaza region. Further, the second news article is on the issue of National Clean Air Program, which was launched by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. As major cities in India, it is not able to achieve the targets which was envisaged under NCAP. Further, the third article is on Einstein probe satellite, which was launched recently by China. As this satellite, it is shaped as a lotus. Then we will proceed to the summary article, which is on a article of editorial, which is there in the Hindu newspaper. Because this editorial, it reports that Indian economy, which is scheduled to grow at 7.3%, it is also witnessing a stagnant demand in some sections. Hence, I will summarize this article, which will help you to clearly understand the various intricacies of gross domestic product. Further, in the main centric articles of the day, I will first deal with the issue of K-shaped recovery. Because post-COVID, Indian economy and its nature of its recovery is under debate. Because on one hand, the government of India, it is saying that the Indian economy, it witnessed a V-shaped recovery. However, some experts are of the opinion that this recovery is not V-shaped, rather it is K-shaped. Hence, we will discuss various types of economic recovery and will also go into detail on whether is India witnessing a K-shaped recovery or not. Then, in the last main centric article, I will deal with the minority education. Hence, let us start our today's discussion. First article, which appeared on page 15 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, as I've already highlighted, South Africa, it has urged the International Court of Justice to order Israel for suspending its military operation. And this particular body, that is International Court of Justice, it is an important international institution which forms an intricate part of GS Paper 2 syllabus. Hence, let us know more about what is this International Court of Justice. Now, this International Court of Justice, it serves as a principal judicial organ of the United Nations. And this particular body, it is headquartered in the first function is that this body, it settles disputes between various nation states that are member of the United Nations. Further, this body, it also provides advisory opinion to various UN bodies to matters which are referred to the International Court of Justice. Now, this particular body, that is International Court of Justice, it comprises of 15 judges who serve on a 9-year term. And the most important part of this composition is that no two judges represent one single country. Now, what is the jurisdiction of this International Court of Justice? Now, this International Court of Justice, it hears matters related to members of the United Nations member states. Hence, only UN member states, they are eligible to appear before the court on their contentious issues. Whereas on the other hand, as far as non-governmental organizations, corporations and individuals are concerned, the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice is not applicable on these particular bodies or individuals. Now, the judgments of this International Court of Justice, they have a binding decree, which means that the judgments that are passed by International Court of Justice, they are final and are not subjected to any appeal in any court of law in the world. Hence, after we have discussed briefly about this International Court of Justice, let us solve the practice MCQ. Now, this practice MCQ is been framed because a similar question on related UN bodies, it was asked in the prelims of the year 2019. Hence, let us look at the model question. With reference to International Court of Justice, consider the following statements. The first statement, it is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, which I've already highlighted in the discussion, is a correct statement. Now, the second statement, only United Nations member states are eligible to appear before the court in the contentious cases. Now, naturally, any aspirant who witnesses a absolute statement, especially when it contains the word only, they will naturally mark this statement as an incorrect statement. However, in this case, this statement is correct because only United Nations member states are eligible to appear before this body. Hence, second statement also is correct. Now, the third statement, judgments delivered by the court are binding upon the parties concerned. Again, as I've already highlighted, the nature of judgments of this body are binding, which makes them final as there is no appeal in any court of law across the world. Hence, the third statement also is correct. Now, let us consider the fourth statement. The fourth statement, it says it has exclusive jurisdiction to try individuals accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Again, as I've already highlighted, the jurisdiction of this ICJ, it extends only to member states of United Nations and it does not extend to any individuals. Hence, this fourth statement is incorrect because this is a jurisdiction of International Criminal Court and not ICJ. Hence, how many of the above statements is or are correct? And the correct answer is option C, because only 3 statements are correct. Whereas on the other hand, as far as PYQ is concerned, here option C was the correct answer. Now with this, let us move to the second article as it appeared in the front page of the Hindu newspaper. Now this particular article, it reports that the Union government, specifically the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, it came up with a national clean air program in the year of 2019. And this program was aimed to reduce air pollution in Indian cities. However, this article, it reports that the majorly, many Indian cities, they are unable to gain a significant reduction in the air pollution. And why are we dealing with this particular topic? It is because GS paper 3 syllabus, it deals with environment pollution and degradation. Hence, let us know more about what is this National Clean Air Program. Now, this National Clean Air Program, it was introduced by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the year of 2019. And this particular program, it was envisaged as a long-term program which gives a time-bound and national level strategy to control air pollution in 131 Indian cities. And these Indian cities are million plus cities, which means that the population of these cities are more than 1 million. Further, this scheme, it also extends to cities who have not attained an reduction in air pollution. Hence, total of 131 cities in 24 states and union territories come under the jurisdiction of this particular program. Now, the objectives of this scheme is threefold. First is that this scheme, it implements mitigation measures in order to reduce the air pollution that are there in these cities. Further, this program, it also establishes air quality monitoring network which will help the local as well as central government to monitor the air quality in these 131 cities. Further, this scheme also envisages a public awareness and capacity building program which will ensure a trained manpower as well as an adequate infrastructure to deal with the issue of air pollution. Now, the targets of this scheme, is that this scheme wants to control air pollution up to 40%. And what is this 40% reduction? Is there in reducing the concentrations of particulate matter, which means both 2.5 PM 2.5 as well as PM 10 particulate matter, which will be reduced by up to 40% by the year 2025 and 26. And this 40% reduction will be taken from the base year, that is year 2017. Now, to implement this scheme, the government it has also launched a Prana portal, as this is a abbreviation for portal of regulation of air pollution in non-attainment cities. As this portal, it will envisage or it will support the monitoring of air pollution, as it will help track physical and financial status of cities, especially these 131 cities. Further, this portal it also provides public with the information about efforts that are already taken to reduce the air pollution. Hence, now that we know about National Clean Air Program, let us solve the model MCQ. And this MCQ has been framed because UPSC, specifically in prelims of the year 2017, it asked a question related to climate and clean air coalition. Hence, the question it asks us with reference to National Clean Air Program, consider the following statements. The first statement, it says that this scheme it aims to improve air quality in million plus cities only. Now, this is an absolute statement. However, million plus cities. Further, the second statement it states that the target is to achieve 40% reduction of CO2 emissions by the year 2025 and 26. Again, this statement is incorrect because the target is to achieve 40% reduction in particulate matter emissions and not CO2 emissions. The third statement, NVIS is a portal for monitoring the implementation of National Clean Air Program. Again, this statement also is incorrect because the portal for monitoring the National Clean Air Program is called PRAN portal. Hence, how many of the above statement are correct? The answer to this question is option D, as none of the three statements are correct. Now, as far as PYQ is concerned, here option B was the correct answer. Now let us move to the third article of the day, which appeared in page 12 of the Indian Express newspaper. Now this article, it states that the China, it has launched a satellite called Einstein probe. And this satellite is shaped as a lotus, and this satellite is aimed to detect X-ray emissions in the outer space. Now this particular news article is important from GS paper 3 perspective, because the syllabus of UPSC it asks us to be aware in the fields of space. Now let us know more about this Lotus satellite. Now this satellite it is called as Einstein probe, and it helps to detect X-ray emissions. Now this satellite it employs two groundbreaking technologies. The first is that it employs an astronomical time domain observation method, as well as it also employs a highly sensitive real-time dynamic sky survey. And this is done through two different types of mechanisms. The 12 petals, which is a lotus-shaped satellite, it contains a wide field X-ray telescope, whereas its two stems, it contains a follow-up X-ray telescope, which enables this satellite to detect not just supernova explosion, but also detect transient celestial objects in the outer space. Now this particular satellite, it was launched by China's academic sciences, and this was done in collaboration with the European Space Agency as well as the Max Planck Institute of Germany. Hence, let us consider the model question. Consider the following statements. The first statement, Einstein probe satellite has been launched by NASA in collaboration with European Space Agency, which again is an incorrect statement because this particular probe was launched by China Academic Sciences in collaboration with European Space Agency. The second statement, the Einstein probe, it employs astronomical time domain observation method to conduct a real-time dynamic sky survey in soft X-ray band. As I've already highlighted, this statement is a correct statement because it employs these two technologies. Now, which of the statements given above is or are correct? From the above discussion, I can safely conclude that option B is correct because second statement was the correct statement. Whereas the PYQ is concerned, here option D was the correct answer. Now let us move to the next article of the day, and I will summarize this particular editorial which appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now this particular editorial, it highlighted that Indian economy, as per the first advance estimate, it has grown by 7.3% in the current fiscal year. Now this particular growth, it is a improvement from last year where Indian economy it grew by 7.2%. Now the trends of GDP growth is important from Prelims perspective in particular, because as you can see in Prelims of the year 2015, a question appeared on rate of growth of real gross domestic product in the last decade, whereas the second statement it dealt with gross domestic product at market prices and the nature of its growth in the last decade itself. Hence, this particular graph is important from exams point of view. And let me highlight that Indian economy, it has grown over a period of last decade with an exception of this particular financial year. Because in this financial year, Indian economy was subjected to a lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic. And due to this lockdown, the economic activity in the country, it reduced. Thereby, both in absolute terms and in terms of GDP growth rate, the Indian economy, it witnessed a decline in this particular financial year. Hence, if a similar question it appears in the prelims next year, then you know the Indian economy, it has not continuously increased over the period of last decade, both in absolute terms and also in terms of GDP growth rate, because in this particular year, the growth rate was negative. Now, this particular topic, it is also important from GS paper 3 perspective because the UPSC main syllabus, it deals with issues relating to economic growth. Now, now a question might appear in your mind, how is India or Indian government able to estimate Indian GDP even before the end of current financial year? And let me tell you, the first advance estimate, which is usually published in January 7th of a particular year, this employs the data of first 7 months up till the month of November in a particular financial year. And based on this 7 months data, the GDP calculation is estimated based on extrapolation. And this first advance estimate, it is the first estimate of Indian economy by the government. And this estimate is also important from budgetary point of view. Because based on this estimate number, the budget numbers are calculated and it helps the government to estimate how much amount of money it will be able to spend in the next year. Further, for example, the advance estimate of the year 2023 and 24, the first advance estimate, it was published on Jan 7th of the year 2024. Whereas the second advanced estimate, which also contains the data of third quarter of a particular financial year, that is October to December, it will be published at the end of March. Sorry, it will be published at February end. Hence, this second advance estimate, it will be published in the year of 2024 on February. And the provisional estimate of country's GDP, it will be published at the end of May 2024. Now next year, that is January 2025, the first advance estimate, it will be first revised estimate will be published in the January of 2025, and the second revised estimate will be published next year, that is January 2026. And the third revised estimate, it will be published in January 2027. Hence, by these three revised estimate, you can understand that the government, it frequently adds more data to its calculation, and it is able to determine the exact Indian GDP, which will be published as an actual GDP after the year 2027. Hence, the importance of data and its frequent revision is very important as far as calculation of GDP is concerned. Now that we have cleared what are the various kinds of estimate, let us understand what this article particularly highlights with respect to India's GDP growth in the year of 2023 and 24. Now this can be understood with respect to four engines that are there of India's GDP growth. The first engine, it is called as private final consumption expenditure, which is abbreviated at FPFCE. And this is the largest component of India's GDP. As it contributes around 60% to India's GDP. Whereas the second component, that is gross fixed capital formation, which understands the spending by various investments, as it is important to boost infrastructure activity as well as productive capacity of the economy. And this is abbreviated as GFCF. And this is the second most important driver of Indian economy. And in recent years, it has contributed to about 30% to India's GDP. The first component, that was private final consumption expenditure, it deals with spending by people in their individual capacity. Whereas the GFCF, it determines how much investment is there by both individuals as well as corporations, as this investment is important as far as growth and investment in the Indian economy is concerned. The third component, which is termed as government final consumption expenditure, and it is abbreviated as GFCE. And this component, it deals with spending by governments, both central and state, in meeting their daily expenses such as salaries and pensions. And this third component, it contributes around 10% of India's GDP. And the fourth driver, it is termed as net exports, which is the difference between exports as well as imports in the country. Now that India, it imports more than it exports, thereby this component, it contributes negatively to the India's GDP. Thereby, this particular fourth component, it brings down the India's GDP. Hence, technically, these three components are important as far as growth of Indian GDP is concerned. And today's article, it highlights that India's gross fixed capital formation, it has increased this year, where I've already highlighted that usually the trend has been around 30%. Whereas in the current year, this has increased to 34.8%, which is a significant growth as far as capital formation is concerned. However, India also is witnessing few challenges to its economic growth. The first challenge is that there is a slow growth of rural economy. Because its most productive rural economy is concerned, the agriculture as well as other areas such as livestock and poultry farming, it is witnessing a slow growth rate of just 1.8%, which is well below the average Indian growth rate. Further, the growth in service sector, especially that of hospitality as well as transport, it is also below the average threshold of Indian economic growth. Hence, what these two factors has led, it has created less disposable income as far as Indian public is concerned, because the rural wages and wages related to service sector, it has stagnated or it has grown less than Indian GDP. Thereby, this has led to a negative or reduced demand of goods and services. And this has created a shortage based in public final consumption expenditure as well as government financial consumption expenditure. Because when people they have low disposable income, it will also mean that the tax collection by the government reduces, thereby reducing the propensity of government's financial expenditure. Further, when public they have less money with themselves, it will also prevent them from spending on various consumption expenditure, thereby bringing both these factors below than their average threshold. Hence, India's economic growth is mostly it is propelled by this particular factor, that is gross fixed capital formation. Hence, this was the summary of the first editorial. And with this, let us move to the first mains related article of the day, which appeared in the editorial section of the Indian Express. Now, the nature of India's economic recovery post COVID-19 pandemic has been subject to various debates, because government, especially in economic survey of year 2020 to 21, it highlighted that Indian economy it witnessed a V-shaped recovery. Whereas on the other hand, many experts who write columns in the newspaper, they are of the opinion that Indian economy it has not witnessed a V-shaped recovery. Rather, Indian economy it has witnessed the K-shaped recovery. Now, why are we dealing with this particular topic, that is nature of Indian economic recovery? And there are two reasons. The first is that in mains of the year 2021, a question directly appeared on India's economic recovery in the year 2020. Because again, this appeared in the economic survey of the same year, and this economic survey it highlighted India's government official stand on Indian economic recovery. Hence, students who are appearing for mains, they should know about the exact nature of Indian economic recovery and what is the official government position on India's economic recovery. Further, this topic it is also important from GS paper 3, because the syllabus it deals with issues relating to growth as well as inclusive growth. Now, today's news article it cites or it reports that SBI, that is State Bank of India, it published a report highlighting that the India's claim or experts claim that the India is witnessing K-shaped recovery is ill-conceived and not correct. And State Bank of India, it is majorly owned by the government of India. Hence, any report which is published by a notable financial institution, it highlights that this also is in line with government's own personal opinion. Thereby, this SBI report and its points are important from exams point of view, because students they can directly highlight or cite the examples or facts that are given in this particular report. Hence, we will deal with what this report highlights and how is India's recovery not K-shaped. Now, before dealing with what is a K-shaped economic recovery, let me highlight various types of economic recovery. And the first type of economic recovery, it is called as a V-shaped economic recovery, which according to Government of India is the nature of Indian economic recovery. Now, this V-shaped recovery, it is the best case scenario of an economic recovery, because when an economy it declines during a period of recession and it automatically rebounds in a very quick manner, this is highlighted as a V-shaped recovery. And this V-shaped recovery, it measures a sharp increase in any economic performance. Hence, it also highlights that economic recovery, although it has recovered to its previous extent, but it has lost some of its potential. Whereas on the other hand, the second kind of economic recovery, it is termed as U-shaped economic recovery. Again, the economy here also recovers to its previous projected territory. However, this recovery is slower than what is there in a V-shaped economic recovery. And in U-shaped economic recovery, the recession is somewhat prolonged or of more duration when compared to that of V-shaped recovery. Now, the third type of economic recovery, it is termed as a W-shaped economic recovery. And this particular example, it is important because in this particular type of economic recovery, the a particular economy, it witnesses two types of recession. Because after the first recession, the Indian or any economy, it witnesses certain jump. However, this economic slowdown, it also brings down the economy back to its slowdown. Hence, this is also known as double dip recession. And this is important because it also signifies a particularly painful period for any economy, because it might also fool investors think when they think that any economy will grow in a particular fashion. Now, the most important is the L-shaped economic recovery, because it occurs especially after a steep recession, as any particular economy which is witnessing a L-shaped recovery, it witnesses a permanent slowdown in economic activity. And this is particularly associated with worst economic performances across the history, because in this type of economic recovery, it gets characterized by high unemployment, slow rate of business investment, as well as sluggish growth rate of any economy. Hence, you can see that any economy which is witnessing a L-shaped recovery, it is witnessing a permanent loss of economic activity, which in other cases have been compensated by somewhat faster economic recovery. Now, let us understand what is a K-shaped recovery. Now, the K-shaped recovery, it signifies that various types or various parts of economy, they are growing at a divergent pace. Because in K-shaped recovery, as you can see from this graph, some parts of the economy are recovering, whereas some other parts, they might be even stagnating or sinking. And according to experts, Indian economy is currently witnessing this particular shape of recovery. And these experts, they have given some examples. Now, this recession which India witnessed was due to COVID-19 pandemic and its associated lockdown. And in this particular period, the salaried class who were employed in high performing companies, they got their salaries during the time of lockdown. Hence, during this time, when a salaried class, they were getting their salaries. However, due to loss or due to lockdown, they were not able to spend this salary on usual consumption activities. Hence, during this period, their total savings, it increased, thereby improving their economic status. Whereas on the other hand, the poor class of Indian economy, they witnessed somewhat loss in their wages. And it was due to imposed lockdown, which resulted into job losses, thereby harming or negatively affecting the poor class of Indian society. Hence, a section of Indian society, they were left with less or no disposable income, thereby negatively affecting their propensity to consume or buy any product. And this is a particular example of K-shaped or divergent nature of Indian economy. Now, this particular trend, according to few experts, it is also been prevalent in the current fiscal year. Now, let me explain this to you with the help of few graphs. Now, as you can see from this particular graph, Indian economy, it is growing at an average rate of 7.3%. Whereas on the other hand, some sections of Indian economy, especially industry, mining, electricity and utilities, construction and services, they are witnessing somewhat higher rate of growth than Indian economy. Hence, people who are employed in these sectors, they are witnessing an increase in their wages. And also, the companies which are there in these sectors, they are witnessing more profits due to their higher economic growth. Hence, due to this particular growth rate, especially in few sectors, it has resulted into increase in gross fixed capital formation, which signifies that ability of Indian economy in general, it has increased as far as investments are concerned. And this signifies this upward trajectory of some parts of Indian economy. Now that we have dealt with the increasing trajectory, now let us deal with few sectors which has witnesses a stagnating or a sinking economic growth. And these sectors, they are allied agricultural services, service sectors, especially trade, hotels and transport. Hence, people who are employed in these sectors, they are witnessing a lower growth rate. Hence, due to this lower growth rate, their salaries have not increased in a desired manner. And this has negatively or reduced their ability to have or to consume, because the disposable income of people who are employed in these particular sectors, they have reduced due to slower growth rate. And this has resulted into reduced final private consumption as well as government consumption, because when people, they have less disposable income, they will be able to spend less amount on their consumption activities. Further, when a section of population, they are witnessing lower growth rate in wages, thereby their taxable income will also reduce, and this will also result into lower tax collection by the government, thereby reducing also their ability to spend on government consumption. Hence, due to reduced or stagnating income, especially in agriculture and trade transport sector, a few section of Indian society, especially who are employed in these sectors, they are witnessing lower disposable income. And according to experts, this has created a skewness in Indian economic growth. And this is visible also in few examples. The first of all is that the two-wheeler purchase in Indian economy, it has reduced in recent years. Further, this has also created a reduced demand in Indian economy, because as I've already highlighted, ability of people to consume or to, it is dependent on the nature of their disposable income. Hence, when the disposable income it reduces, it negatively affects their ability to consume. Hence, India's private final consumption expenditure and government final consumption expenditure, it has risen at a lower rate as far as Indian GDP or gross capital formation is concerned. Hence, due to reduced two-wheeler purchase and weakening demand, the experts are of the opinion that Indian economy, it is witnessing a skewed nature of recovery. However, SBI's report, it is highlighting that this K-shaped recovery, it is not correct, because according to government's official position, India's economy, it is witnessing a V-shaped recovery. And because of this, the SBI report, it has highlighted few examples which gives an opinion that India is witnessing a V-shaped recovery. Now, how is SBI report highlighting that India is not witnessing a K-shaped recovery? Now, the first example that this SBI report highlights is that India's income equality or India's income inequality, it has reduced since pandemic. And how is it highlighting this? Now, to understand a nature of income inequality, there's a graph called Gini coefficient or Lorentz curve. As this particular graph, it deals with population on x-axis as well as national income on x-axis, y-axis. Hence, if an economy it is witnessing a perfect income equality, the graph of that economy will go this way. However, due to increased income inequality, this graph in an actual economy looks like this. And hence, this gap, it highlights the nature of income inequality in any economy. The larger is this gap, the larger is the any income inequality in an economy. And according to SBI report, this gap, it has reduced. How? Because according to SBI, the Gini coefficient on taxable income, it has reduced in this manner. Thereby, according to SBI report, India has witnessed a reduced income inequality. Further, according to SBI report, India's tax base has also widened because in the year of 2020 to 21, India had 7 crore taxpayers, whereas in the current financial year, that is 2023 and 24, up till December, as many as 8.2 crore people are registered taxpayers. Hence, you can see this amount has increased, highlighting that India's tax base has actually widened. Further, there's also a shift in India's taxpayer because people who were in lower income tax slabs, they have moved to higher income tax slabs. For example, as many as 36.3% of people who were previously below 3.5 lakh taxable income, they have moved actually to higher income slabs. For example, as many as people they have moved from previously below 3.5 lakh threshold to 3.5 to 5 lakh threshold as well as 5 lakh to 10 lakh threshold. And because of this movement, India's total tax collection it has increased by 21.3%. And this highlights that there has been a shift in taxpayers, which means that taxpayers in Indian economy it has rather grown. And when there's an income inequality, this ideally should have reduced. Hence, according to SBI report, due to increase in taxpayers number as well as shift from lower to higher income slabs, it highlights that actually income inequality has reduced after the pandemic. Further, as far as companies or firms in India are concerned, these firms has also transitioned from macro to larger firms. For example, almost 19.5% of firms they have moved from macro to small, medium as well as large firms. And this highlights that total amount of firms or the nature of these firms they have also transitioned due to growth in Indian economy. And these highlights that the nature of Indian recovery is not K-shaped. Further, there's also been a rising trend in India's female labor force participation rate. Because during the year 2017 and 18, India's labor force participation rate as far as females were concerned, it has came down or it has come down to just 23.3%. However, in the year of 2022 and 23, this female labor force participation has actually increased to 37%. Thereby, more amount of females in the Indian economy, they appear to be employed as far as current financial year or last financial year is concerned. And all these factors, that is reduced income equality because of widened tax base or shift in taxpayers, as well as transition into larger firms, as well as rising female labor force participation rate. This highlights that inequality in Indian economy, it has actually decreased after pandemic. And this, it highlights that India's economic recovery was not K-shaped, rather it was V-shaped. And this has resulted into various examples. For example, India's consumption, especially in rural areas, it has increased. And the poorest 90% of the population, their ability to consume has increased by rupees 8.2 lakh crores in the last few years. Further, according to this SBI report, by the year 2030, as many as 50% of India's total consumption will be driven by this 90% of India's population. Hence, this example, it also highlights that in economic inequality in India, it has actually reduced. Further, as I've highlighted in the previous slide, that amount of sale of two-wheelers in Indian economy, it was given as an example that this reduction in two-wheeler sale was a sign of rural distress. However, on the other hand, the SBI report, it highlights that people, due to reduced income inequality, they've actually moved from purchasing two-wheelers to that of four-wheelers. And because of banking data, it also highlights growth in loans for buying four-wheelers. Hence, the social and economic status of people in India, it has actually improved after the post-pandemic, according to this SBI report. Now, it is also important for government to make the growth of Indian economy more inclusive in nature. Hence, it is also the domain of the government to prevent any further reduction in income inequality. Hence, if a pandemic or any economic disruption happens in the future, government should have a few steps in mind which should prevent the economic from stagnating or falling down. Thereby, what is the way forward in order to make this Indian economic recovery more broad based? And there are few suggestions in this regard. The first is that government, it should look to increase its social sector spending by larger amounts. Now, in this regard, government, it has increased its social spending in last few years, particularly by bringing Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or by bringing the PM Jan Arogya Yojana. Because this particular Awas Yojana, it provides people of lower economic strata with a house. Whereas on the other hand, this Jan Arogya Yojana, it provides people with health insurance, which reduces their out-of-pocket expenditure on healthcare. Thereby, by protecting the lowest strata of this Indian society, the government, it can ensure that the lowest strata of Indian society, it is protected in a more efficient manner. Further, the government, it should also witness or it should also emphasize on development of its human capital. Because only if we are able to develop our human capital, it will enable the government to reap the benefits of demographic dividend. Hence, the government, it should look to provide Indian people in general with skill training as well as vocational training. As this skill training and vocational training, it will enable the human capital in India to increase their employability. And because of their increased human capital, the Indian demographic dividend will be able to get better and more jobs. Further, India should also aim to reduce amount of poverty and hunger in the society. And in this regard, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana is also very important, because as per this scheme, government it is providing people of below poverty line with free rations through various schemes. Hence, by increasing the social sector spending, developing the human capital, and reducing the poverty and hunger in the Indian society, by doing this, the government can ensure a more broad based Indian economic recovery. And this was all for today's discussion. Is India witnessing a K shaped recovery in the Indian economy? And with this, let us move to the last mains related article of the day, which is on the issue of minority educational institutions. And this has been in news because the status of minority status of Aligarh Muslim University, it has been disputed for very long. And the Supreme Court of India, it will be hearing please on whether this Aligarh Muslim University or whether it will get the minority status or not. And this particular news article is important from GS paper 2 perspective, mainly because Indian constitution it has significant provisions for protecting the cultural and educational rights of minorities in the India. Further, minority education it is also important part of society or social development, because the syllabus itself it deals with issues relating to development and management of social sector and services with related to education. Further, a similar question it appeared in mains of the year 2018, because the question it asked whether NCSC can enforce implementation of constitutional reservation for scheduled caste in religious minority institutions. Hence, we should understand why this minority education and their rights related to minority educational institutions are important from exams point of view. Now, Indian constitution, which is the supreme law of land, it guarantees minorities in the country with certain cultural and educational rights. First of all, with Article 29 of the Constitution, it protects the interest of minority by two various subsections. The first is that any section of citizens who are residing in territory of India and those who have a distinct language, script, culture of its own, they have the inherent right to conserve their culture. Further, the second subsection of this very article, it highlights that no citizen of India they should be denied admission on any educational institution which is maintained or receiving aid by the state only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. Further, Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, it also provides the minorities with the right to establish and administer the educational institution of their own choice. And in this regard, the Constitution it protects the property of minority educational institution, because if the state it decides to acquire the property of minority educational institution, then the state is liable to pay a compensation to that particular institution. Further, the state shall also not discriminate in granting aid to any educational institution based on whether it is managed by a particular minority. Hence, Indian Constitution by virtue of Article 29 and 30 it provides cultural and educational rights to minorities in the country. Now, what is the importance of this particular section of part 3 of the Indian Constitution? First of all, is that this provides the opportunity for minorities to undertake growth and development of their population. Because ideally, minorities they are discriminated against in any society. Hence, when the supreme law of land itself it grants these minorities an opportunity for growth and development by establishing any educational institution, it provides people of these minority communities to get educated in these very educational institutions. Further, by establishing these educational institutions, the constitution it also envisages in conserving the unique culture and language that these minorities usually have. Because these minorities they do not just have a unique language, but they also have a unique script and culture of their own. Hence, by protecting this very culture, what the constitution it envisages is that it wants to provide these minorities a sense of security. Because when a minority they have a sense of security that the supreme law of land it itself is protecting them, then it will help them to grow and develop in a much more efficient manner. And these three aspects it is also very important as far as national integration is concerned, because when minorities of a country they grow and develop or are able to conserve their unique language and culture, it will give them a sense of security. And when this sense of security it preserves and respect the diverse identities that these minorities have, it will not just strengthen these minorities, but it will also strengthen the social fabric of the entire society. Hence, this will lead to increased fraternity as well as unity as far as Indian polity is concerned. Thereby, the importance of this cultural and educational right is concerned, it not just provides minorities with justice, it provides them with rights, as well as it also envisages the ideals of increasing fraternity in the Indian constitution. Hence, these three ideals, which are mentioned in the preamble of the constitution, it is also important to be protected as far as cultural and educational rights of minorities are concerned. Now, who is a minority in India? Now, the Constitution of India, it mentions two words, that is linguistic as well as religious minorities. However, does Indian constitution define minorities? The answer obviously is not. Because Indian constitution it does not highlight which of the communities in India are defined as minority communities. And this definition of who are minorities in India, it is provided in the National Commission of Minorities Act. Because according to this act, it is the central government which can notify religious minorities in India. And according to this act, the government of India it has notified these six communities, that are Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Parsis as well as Jains, as religious minority in India as far as all India is concerned. Thereby, these six minorities, according to this particular act, is a determined or defined at a nationwide level. However, the status, whether this minority status should be given nationwide or state-wise, it came into question in front of Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court of India in TMA Pi case, which was TMA Pi versus State of Karnataka, in the year of 2002, it determined that the nature of minorities in India, it should be determined not nationwide rather than state-wise. Hence, the current status of determining or defining the minorities in India, it is based on a state-wise manner. Now further, this National Commission of Minorities Act, it also provided for establishing of National Commission for Minority Educational Institution. And this particular body, it is aimed to enable minorities to establish their educational institution as well as smoothly administer these very educational institutions, which are termed as minority educational institution. Now, this particular body, it decides on all questions related to status of minority educational institution in India. Further, it also deals with disputes pertaining to minority status, as well as it also grants the no objection certificate to these very educational institutions. Hence, this body it acts as an appellate authority as far as deciding upon the issues of minority status is concerned. Further, this commission it also has a power to seek information from any complaint as far as violation or deprivation of minority educational rights are concerned. Further, this order of this commission it can only be challenged in high courts as well as Supreme Court of the country under Article 226 as well as 277 of the Indian Constitution. Hence, this National Commission for Minority Educational Institution, it decides on status of minority educational institution. It has a power to seek information as far as deprivation of minority rights are concerned, and it also has a final order which can only be challenged in High Court as well as Supreme Court of India. Further, what are the benefits that are extended to these minority educational institutions? As these institutions, they have few rights with them. The first is that these education or these minorities, they have a right to establish as well as administer any educational institution of their own choice. Further, when a state it acquires any property of these particular educational institutions, then the state is liable to pay a compensation as far as acquiring the state property is concerned. Further, these educational institutions that are minority educational institutions, they also have a right to impart religious education in them. Further, these minority educational institution, they also have a right to administer these minority educational institution based on their own choice. And by right to administer, I mean that these minority educational institution, they are free to choose principal or heads of these particular institutions. Further, these educational institutions, they have some rights as far as admitting the students are concerned. Most important, that these institutions, they are not subjected to reservation under Article 15 of the Indian Constitution. Hence, they are not required to reserve seats for socially and educational communities or social or educationally backward communities in India that are scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, as well as other backward classes. Further, these educational institutions, they are also not subjected to Section 12 of Right to Education Act, because this particular section of RTE Act, it provided that any minority educational institution or any educational institution, they should have 25% reservation of economically weaker section students. However, these minority educational institutions, they are not required to provide these reservation for economically weaker section students. Further, these educational institutions, they can also provide reservation up to 50% to students belonging to their own community. Hence, these educational institutions, they have right to seek admissions of up to 50% of students from their own community, and they are also not subjected to provide reservation to other socially and educationally backward classes. Hence, these are the benefits that are extended to minority education institutions across the country. And this right, it is a very important right. Thereby, every educational institution which may be either established or administered by a minority community in India, it wants to seek a recognition as a minority educational institution. Now, what is the status of education as far as minorities are concerned? And let me tell you, minorities in India are subjected to what is called an educational backwardness. And this is very much prevalent as far as Muslim community is concerned. Because Muslims in India, they lag behind other communities as far as educational attainment and their levels are concerned. For example, in census of 2011, India's national average literacy was 72.5%. Whereas on the other hand, the average literacy of Muslims in India, it was well below the national average and it was 68.54%. Hence, you can see from this example, the literacy level of Muslims in India, it was well below average. And also in many states, Muslims, they have a similar educational backwardness as far as scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are concerned. Further, minorities in India, they are also underrepresented as far as educational institutions are concerned, not just in primary and secondary level, but Muslims, they are particularly underrepresented in higher educational institutions. Thereby, these two examples, they highlight that status of minorities, especially with that of Muslims, it is well below the national average. Thereby, it is important to extend some kind of benefits to these communities so that they can attain the national average and also in future they can move well above the national average. And in this regard, let me give you few suggestions. The first suggestion is that these minorities, they should be provided with an equal opportunities commission. As this commission, it will be able to investigate grievances as far as denial of educational rights to minorities are concerned. Because of educational backwardness and underrepresentation in educational institutions, these minority communities, they are subjected to social discrimination. Hence, when there's a social discrimination in any society, it will prevent even the minorities to seek their constitutionally guaranteed rights. Thereby, an Equal Opportunities Commission, it will help investigate grievances as far as denial of rights to educational minorities are concerned. Further, it is also very important to link traditional religious institutions such as these madrasas with higher secondary school board, because this linking will help the education which is attained in these traditional institutions gain a kind of social acceptance. Hence, students who are educated in these madrasas will benefit from this recognition by higher educational school board. Further, there's also need to inculcate what is called as a diversity index as far as educational institutions are concerned. And these diversity index can be utilized to provide grants to these educational institutions which have a higher diversity index, because then educational institution, they will be wanting to have a diverse section of the students. And when religious minorities as well as linguistic minorities, they are well represented in any educational institution, this will help those educational institutions gain more grants from governments as far as diversity index are concerned. Further, government should also look to establish schools specifically for religious minorities. And this should be done in lines for government. It has already established institutions for other marginalized sections, especially scheduled tribes, in form of Eklavya regional model schools. And this particular model can also be implemented for establishing the schools as far as minorities are concerned. Hence, Due to educational backwardness and underrepresentation, minorities in India, they are subjected to social discrimination. Hence, it is the duty of the government to provide protection or to extend the constitutionally guaranteed protection to these minorities by establishing an Equal Opportunities Commission, which will investigate grievances as far as denial of educational rights are concerned. Further, by linking educational institutions which are traditional in nature with higher secondary school board will help these educational institutions have a greater recognition. Further, by inculcating or incorporating a diversity index as far as granting benefits to educational institutions are concerned, it will help these educational institutions have a diverse set of students. And further, by establishing school for minorities in line with institutions for scheduled tribes will help minorities to attain better educational level. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on minority educational institution, and it also concludes our today's discussion of Daily News Simplified. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me those doubts in the comment section down below, as our team will try to address your doubts at the earliest possible time. Hence, with this, I conclude our today's DNS and I wish you a very good night.